Well, now it's taking a second. Oh, are we live? We are live.
We are live.
Ah, finally it worked. I don't know why that took a second. But welcome back everybody. Today we are joined by Gibran Malik, me, and Amir. And sorry that we're going to have a lower production value. For some reason, I don't have access to the files where our intro video is, so we're gonna go without it. So, just to continue a little bit while we were talking, uh, well, we can actually probably just restart because we put a link to your book. It's on Amazon, The Cradle of Prophecy. Go check it out. And I don't know, just tell us,
Definitely.
tell our audience a little bit about the book.
So, The Cradle of
And
Prophecy
yourself.
is
And
a fictional book,
yourself, Gibran.
and myself, yes. So, my
Sorry.
name is Gibran Malik. A Muslim born and raised in New York City. My parents came from Pakistan, and I've been very interested in also researching
Hmm.
and studying uh, Judaism, Islam, its connections, also Christianity as well. And over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of interfaith work, and I've made a book called The Cradle of Prophecy, written a book that is a collection of short stories, fictional stories based on the philosophy that we both share as Muslims and Jews, people of Abraham, that transcend the traditional capsules that we have. So we speak in different languages, we have different customs, but they're based on many of the same principles that we share. And the stories are
Hmm.
based on that wisdom and that philosophy, and also help to bring the focus back to those principles, because I think that is extremely important. Like I said earlier, before we went live, you know, traditions without principles are like clothes on a dead body. It might look
Hmm.
beautiful and pretty and everything like that, but if it doesn't have the principles behind it, then it can't bring to fruition any goodness. And I think that's really important, because with all of our differences, we need to understand how much important it is, how much more important it is to that we have the same shared principles, which is
Hmm.
huge. And I think
It's
the focus
huge.
should constantly be brought back to that. So it's on Amazon, The Cradle of Prophecy. You can order it today. Yeah, and I'm grateful to be on the show, to be with you guys.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Gibran. It's a real pleasure to have you on. And I just wanted to get into a little bit of the similarities, right, between
Hmm.
Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. In your studies, coming from the Muslim faith and then looking into Judaism and into Christianity, what are those similarities and overlaps that you see? And how come they're not focused on more? We tend to look at the differences in laws and in traditions and in rules, but we don't look at what we have shared. And there's so much that overlaps.
There's an incredible amount of overlap, especially with people who do a little bit of study. Will come to see that,
Hmm.
especially with Judaism and Islam, and which is interesting, because although we've had
Definitely.
our issues with Christianity, and as far as Christian empires and Muslim empires fighting, obviously the crux of the issue today and in most recent history is between Muslims and Jews. Um, and but with Muslims and Jews, we share almost, I would say, almost all of the same principles from my studies. Orthodox Judaism and Orthodox Islam, I would consider maybe Sunni Islam. Um, when you get to the meat and potatoes of it, it philosophically, it's fundamentally the same, with the exception
Hmm.
of whether or not someone is a prophet or not. That kind of divine
Yeah.
stamp, and some minor
Sure.
other issues philosophically, as far as when you wake up in the day as an Orthodox Jew, or a practicing Orthodox Muslim, I would consider, you have the same philosophical outlook on life. You're concerned about your actions. You're concerned about your deeds. You're concerned about
Hmm.
making daily repentance. You're concerned about charity. You're concerned about um, all these different things that we both wake up and share. And this is regardless of our traditional capsule, meaning that us as Muslims and as Jews, if you're practicing, you believe that just because you're born in your tradition doesn't mean you're safe from, uh, you know, um, being punished or being held accountable for your actions, you know.
Mhm.
And that's really important to know. So that means that we're both looking at this every day, thinking about our actions, our deeds, how what we do affects the world around us. And it's just so interesting that we are at odds, and we spend most of our energy um, being at odds about land or nationality or a flag or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
So I think that that's one of the biggest things that we should really realize often.
For
Yeah.
sure, Gibran. I fully agree with that, and I think that there's so many people that maybe are agnostic or atheist, and they look at these religions from the side, and they don't really understand the connection. And even when you spoke about
Mm-hmm.
charity, the word for charity in Hebrew is zakah, and
Yeah.
in Arabic, I
Zakat.
believe it's zakah,
It's
right?
zakat. Yeah.
Sadaqah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so close.
No, the actual
It's
word
so,
is the same. Zakat is the action. Sorry to cut you off. Zakat is
No.
the action of officially giving part of your earnings.
ah
Yeah,
okay.
but the actual act of itself is sadaqah. It's the same exact word. It's charity.
Oh wow. Oh
Zakat
wow.
is more of an obligation on a Muslim as a minimum that you have to give every year as a Muslim, you know, as far as charity. But charity is charity. You can give
Mm,
whatever you want. You can give more than what you're obligated to give, and you can give in general. You know, so
mhm,
in Islam, even a smile is considered charity. Anything that you do for someone
Yeah.
to enrich them is considered sadaqah. You know, because you're giving out of yourself, whether it's finances or actions or time. That's considered all sadaqah.
Yeah. And
amazing.
it
So
always amazes me. Sorry.
yeah, no,
What?
no worries.
Oh,
Go
there.
ahead,
Oh,
go
you're
ahead.
back. Your voice cut out for a bit. I was just gonna say it always amazes me that like whenever I don't know I read about Islam or I learn about some fundamental part of Islam, it always strikes me at how similar Islam is to Judaism. It's much more similar to Judaism than Christianity is, in my opinion. I mean, not only are the whole like our holy
Mm-hmm.
languages, ours being Hebrew and yours being Arabic, they're already like
Mm-hmm.
this similar languages. Like the words come from the same
Mhm,
roots and they're read the same. But there's also
Mm-hmm.
just like the way of thinking about the faith is also very similar because like the
mhm,
Jewish version or like the way Jews think about the word faith in Hebrew emunah is way more similar to the way Muslims tend to think about faith, or at least the way I've learned about it from clerics or any academic papers on it. Is like it's more of a loyalty to God than
Mm-hmm.
anything. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not something that like we really get with Christians. That's like that basic fundamental thing about what faith in God means.
mm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it differs with Christianity when it comes to the Messiah and Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
and through Jesus's teachings, they adopted new ways of thinking and new interpretations. Like, you know, kind of the Christians were the first group of people to say, okay, you know, if everything here is made from God, then everything here is pure. So no animal and no type of food is haram. We can eat anything basically, right? And that was a huge change to how people have been living before then, of course, with not being able to eat pork and other hooved animals. So
Yeah.
I think there's an evolution, and even if you're looking at Islam, I think there's an evolution there which is quite clear to see. You can see that the prayers have increased from two that used to be before in temple times to three in Judaism today, and to five in Islam. The difference, of course, of alcohol being forbidden in
Mhm.
Islam, and in Judaism, of course, you're allowed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
Um,
kind of restricted, though. I mean, like, you're not supposed to go full out with it. You're only really supposed to have, like, the wines for celebrations, but it's still kind of frowned upon.
oh, really? I thought it was completely forbidden. Maybe
Oh, no,
Gibran can.
I'm talking about Jews.
Oh, okay,
Judaism.
right.
Yeah, in
I
Yeah.
Judaism,
see.
being drunk, from what I know, being drunk is a sin. You can drink a little bit
Yeah.
just to, soften the food in your stomach and relax a little bit, and
Yeah.
in the parlance of our times, you can get a little buzz. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But you
mm,
shouldn't go beyond
mm.
that.
Yeah.
Feel a little good, and then that's it. That's you do. That's how. And I have a great amount of respect for that, because even from an Islamic point of view, liquor was only forbidden because of people's inability to handle it. It wasn't that it was
Yeah.
outright fundamentally evil, because it would have always been forbidden completely. It would not be that God would allow something that's evil inherently to be a
Mm,
part of any previous tradition. We don't deny that alcohol is not forbidden for the Jewish people. It's just that for Muslims, God commanded us that, based on just the way people behave, that it's just better to just ban, because people, it only takes one person to, destroy a family and get drunk. Me and you, and
Yeah.
we can probably drink and control our alcohol, but the statistical reality of the damage it's going to do, that's the reason why it's just, I personally, it's an opinion of mine, but most Muslims hold to that that's probably what ends up why it ended up being forbidden.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Which I mean is honestly, I respect that like a lot. Like I myself, like I drink, but I am predisposed because of family background and history to alcoholism. So like I limit the amount that I drink a lot, and it's
Yeah,
tough. So like I get the idea of banning it, because like if it only takes one to destroy a family, if that one person can't handle it, then yeah. So, I mean like because it's tough limiting yourself. Like there are times where like I could just be sitting there
it's
thinking
something
like,
like that. And
God, I want a
what's
beer.
interesting is that, yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sorry, there's a power issue here. Give me a second.
mm.
Oh,
No
okay. I was
worries.
wondering if you were making a hot pocket.
Sorry about that. It's interesting that, no, I was just trying to connect charger, and it's just giving me a problem. Not sure why.
Yeah.
No worries. No worries.
But it's interesting that Judaism does have a lot of rulings that are based on that idea, though, about, maybe there is some truth behind something, but because of the damage it can cause to the Jewish community, it's outright forbidden, from what I know. So conceptually, the idea of not allowing something, the rabbis forbade a lot of situations that became halakha, they became law, and it might not be written law, but it's because it's something that becomes harmful to a community. It just becomes law that this is not what's allowed. So the idea of protecting the community and the civility and the function of the community, like I was kind of repeating myself, the idea of that is shared in both Muslims and Jews.
Mm.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. We do have a question here from one of our viewers, Gibran, and I'd like to see what your response is. It's quite an interesting one, and it will probably lead us on into the
Yeah.
next bit of our discussion.
Let me bring
But
it
our
up.
friend Neil, yeah, our friend Neil says, how did you get from studying Judaism and Islam to developing your opinions about the Israel-Palestine conflict or Israeli-Arab conflict?
So back to both the secular view and the religious view, there's
Hmm.
two different. I can't wholeheartedly say that this is what should be done. I mean, nobody can really say that,
Yeah.
because the issue is so it's so many viewpoints on it, as to why we are where we are. Um,
Definitely.
but
Yeah.
obviously, from a secular standpoint, there is a wall that we hit, um, that religious people don't hit, or at least religious Jews and Muslims don't hit, which is the idea of why what's the word I'm looking for? Why the conflict is still existing. And what I mean by that is, from a religious point of view, um, both Muslims share the idea that whatever is happening to us is our actions in some way, and whatever good comes to us is happening also because of we're doing things the right way. So obviously, you read in the Torah that Hashem will protect the Jewish people, and all their enemies will fall and not be able to essentially do anything, as long as they're following what they're supposed to follow, and that's a promise. From a religious point of view, you have to look at that and say, well, there's something that we're not doing right, and that's the reason why we have all this anti. I wouldn't even say go as far as to say anti, but the issues to the extent that they're people can just be jealous of someone and
we're having a bit of a connection issue, folks. Give us a second. Is there anything I can do to fix that?
Hopefully he'll be back there in a sec.
Yeah.
If you have to reconnect him, Jared, maybe try and get him to leave and come back. But I think we're touching on some really, really interesting points. I'd love to hear what Gibran has to say about what things that we can do to better the situation over here in the Holy Land today, because I'm sure he's got some really interesting insights.
Yeah. Who has his number? King does.
Yeah. But it's very interesting to see that somebody like Gibran has taken the time to go and study Judaism and look into Christianity, and I think it's very important for people in general that are curious to go out there and really study. Hey Gibran, glad to have you back.
Yeah, I'm sorry I lost it. I don't know what, it just freaked out and just exited and then jumped back in. Yeah.
No worries. No worries.
It happens sometimes with wireless connections.
Like I was saying, from a religious point of view, so like I was saying, from a religious point of view, there's that to consider, right? Like, what did we do, or what are we doing that make the situation worse than it is? From a secular point of view, it's more of just an open-ended fight to understand each other and to just basically end the conflict by any means hopefully necessary. Hopefully peacefully, but then you still have to ultimately fight and have a defense and take action and things like that. So there's two different things going on here. So it's hard to say, because I am a religious person, and I also understand the secular point of view. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. So from a religious point of view, the Israeli and Palestinian conflict is more of an issue of spirituality. It's more of a spiritual issue, and then that would translate into a better physical reality if the spiritual issue is taken care of. And I know that a lot of times people can't see the connection between the two because it seems like it's so totally different. Why would how you behave or how you think about life change the way you are treating people? I believe it does. I believe that the Israeli government is not all the way kosher, and that's it. Yeah. That's obviously with already noting that that Hamas and the opposite side of the spectrum is also obviously not halal. But the question is, even if we both know that, how do we get out of that situation? How do we
break the cycle?
Transition out of a situation where our leaders are not? Yeah, exactly. How are we transitioning out from where our leaders are not the type of leaders that we have today? And I think it has to do with a lot of our own as a community, because we elect our leaders. Our leaders are not just popping up, and then they just all of a sudden have control. They rally people, they do their marketing, they do their their spin, and it's up to us to say that we're willing to buy this, or we're willing to go this route. From a Palestinian point of view, it has to be looked at as, why is this the way that we should handle it? Why is this an attractive narrative? I made a post recently, and it caused a lot of controversy about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And my point of view was to look at it and say, well, right now, if the Palestinians were in control militarily, and the Israelis were the ones that were, let's say, the tables were turned, as far as the situation was concerned, it would have been written differently. I would have written it from the perspective of criticizing the Palestinians more than I've criticized the Israeli side. But I criticized the Israeli side more, even though it probably seems cliche that, okay, well, he's Muslim, so of course he's going to criticize the Israeli side more. But if you look at what I actually say, I'm actually endorsing the idea of a one-state solution where Israel would be the government. So that's not the normal position a Muslim would take. But the reason why I said that was, it wouldn't just be the Israel that exists now. It would be a totally different Israeli government that goes with the principles that are in the Torah. You don't have to be super religious or make sure you dress a certain exact way or be openly traditional in a certain way. But the principles that are in the Torah, I personally believe, as a religious person, as a devout Muslim, are the exact same principles that I share and Muslims share, and that those principles, if followed, will actually solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And of course, there's other facets to it. America gets involved. The UN gets involved. I believe that there's a lot of politics behind the scenes that all three of us and many of us don't even know about, that exacerbate the situation and cause it to get worse. And it just makes it worse for everyone. But ultimately, we have to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing that's continuing this? What haven't we not tried? What have we tried and what have we not tried?
Exactly.
Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. What are we?
That's what we've been doing here,
Gibran. But it will work this time.
That's what we've been doing.
Inshallah, Bezrat Hashem, it will work. But we have to do something different. We got to do something different. We have to realize that there's something greater at play here, because it's obviously not a issue of force or military power. The Israeli military has an immense power, and part of what my post was saying that Hamas is not like Egypt or Lebanon or a sovereign country. It's not like Iran. Hamas is it's like a gang. I mean, they call it, it's an officially elected government, quote unquote, but they're within Israeli military control and territory. They're not in Egypt. Egypt is not saying that they're here. You know what I mean? They're in a place where no one else is going to care other than the state of Israel. So it almost seems as if they're allowed to exist in a weird way. And I know it's complicated, and there's a reason for checkpoints, and there's a reason for all these things. But if you look at my post, I kind of put the onus more on the Israeli side, and like I said, only because of the issue of power. If it was Palestinian checkpoints and Israelis were walking through them, I promise you, if you study my history about how I criticized my own people when ISIS and other things came about, I've said it the other way around. But because of the way that the situation is, you have to speak to the one in charge. It's like if you have two kids, and the older kid, the more power one that actually has control, both of them have an issue, but you need to speak to that one a lot more, because they're the ones that are actually in control and can actually do something. The other kid you also have to speak to and reprimand them, but the onus is a lot on the bigger kid, because if the bigger kid is not willing to change certain things, nothing's really going to change, So, and it has to be done differently. It can't be. There's no military solution to this.
There's no military solution, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because I don't think most Israelis realize what you just said, Gibran. They feel that a lot of the onus is on the Palestinian side. Now, for me, I'm not interested. Like for our talk's sake, I'm not interested in the Palestinian side because I'm not Palestinian and I don't have any control over what happens in the PA and what happens in Gaza. But I do have control over what happens in Israel. And I do have my community of friends, my family, my people around me that I can influence, that it can be a domino effect at starting to realize that if we're going to solve this situation within our lifetime, we need to be proactive. We can't just sit around, you know. I can't go to the Kotel every year or anytime I'm in Jerusalem and put a little note in and say world peace without me doing anything, without any acts being done. You know, you have to put something into practice. And I think over here, one of the key things that nobody's really addressing is stopping the hatred at its root level, which is, you know, of course, on many different layers, but it starts from one's home. It starts from what you hear in your community, in your surroundings. It's about what you believe. You know, a lot of the times, Israelis and Palestinians will believe a narrative or something that they're being told, which is completely false. There's no truth behind what is being said. And unfortunately, you know, life is complicated enough, but people struggle to sift through what is real and what is made up for clicks and for, you know, journalism purposes or for any other people's agenda behind it. So one of the things that the podcast is trying to do, Gibran, is bring Israelis and Palestinians together. And we are doing that, and we have had joint podcasts where we talk about issues and we go through things. Unfortunately, though, the ground isn't fertile yet for peace. So when my Palestinian cousins feel scared to come on the show just to talk with me, just to have a sit down conversation and just to chat about what's going on, we know that there's a real issue at hand that we need to solve before we even start this fertilizing of the soil, if you like, for it. So it needs to really be a bottom up transition that happens over here. And we had the flashpoint of the conflict earlier in the year. For me, that was a warning sign of possible things to come if we don't start right now. Because the things we saw here, lynchings of Arabs, lynchings of Jews, it was like a mirror image of each other, of hatred, of violence, of all the worst things coming out in that conflict that we saw, you know, that was almost accelerated by the social media and by the world media and by all these people, influencers pushing their 2 cents in here, and all of this stuff put fuel on the fire. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
And that
No, you wanted...
that happens. That has happened historically against the Jewish people most of the time. For instance, when things were going bad in many countries, whether they happen to be Muslim countries or even America, it doesn't matter. Every country that Jews lived in, when things were not going good for the country, one of the easy tactics to that politicians use is to blame some other social group that is insular, living within their society. Jewish people are not insular because they want to be. They're insular because of, culturally speaking and traditionally speaking, they want to preserve their identity, and there's a reason for that. Especially if you read the Torah, you read the Bible, it makes sense. But it also makes them an easy scapegoat because people are not familiar with the Jewish people. They only see them do their own thing, whatever. And politicians definitely take advantage of that tactic, and the Jewish people have suffered for it more than anyone, I think, using that tactic. I think they've suffered the most from that tactic. Other people have gotten that tactic as well. Muslims have recently come under that since 9/11, and
sure, definitely,
probably prior, but really since 9/11, especially, you know, all of a sudden we're scary. Today we were serving falafel and shawarma, but all of a sudden now it seems like we're going to blow something up. All of a
Mhm.
Yeah.
sudden,
Yeah.
right?
Oh.
So
Yeah.
the media has a lot to do with it. It does not help the situation. Politicians make money off of conflict,
Mhm.
and I don't trust the Israeli government. I obviously do not open issue, whereas with the it's more of a hidden, sly way of issues for the Jewish. And I think that it's problematic. One thing that needs to happen is that the Palestinian people need to be respected for their social identity. This idea of, there was never a Palestinian people, there was no such thing as a Palestinian culture, or whatever the case may be. All these, as far as dating and timeline, are irrelevant, because whether or not prior to a certain point there wasn't a coalescent, concrete culture that had a national anthem, or
Mhm.
nationalism is just a call for unity based on similarity, right? So that can happen at any time, throughout human history,
Definitely.
and it has happened
Definitely.
at different times throughout human history. And it happens not as it existing in and of itself, right? So we can argue about when the Palestinian identity came into being, but that doesn't change the fact that
Yeah.
there's millions of people that identify themselves as Palestinian, and they have a culture that they consider Palestinian and distinct from other Arabs. There's a lot of similarities with other Arabs, but they do have things that are very distinct about themselves that are different from, let's say, Moroccans or Saudis or Gulf Arabs. So we have to accept that. We have to accept that. You have to
But
respect
how would you
the identity
convince
that
then?
they
How
and at the same time,
I'm
by
with
doing
you.
that, you'll also.
Yeah.
Hmm?
No, no, sorry. Go ahead. I cut you out. Sorry, sorry.
Yeah. I think we're having a bit of an issue with
So that's one
connection
thing.
speed.
So you were asking me how do you convince the Israelis about that?
Yeah, like say I'm all for like, recognizing, of course,
Is that what you were
Palestinian
asking?
society and the history and the differences, like you said, to Gulf Arabs, to Moroccans. It's clear to me. It's probably clear to anyone else that has visited the region. There
Mm-hmm.
are Israelis that are very stuck in their mindset. No, they're just Arabs. They moved here. There was a big influx during the Ottoman regime. They flooded the area. They came for migrant
Mm-hmm.
work. A lot of the family names are
Mm-hmm.
Masri and Damascai and Baghdadi, and they're from all over. How do you get through to that person?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's something I haven't cracked yet. I haven't cracked how you convince someone that is so staunch in their viewpoint that they don't want to wiggle.
I know, and look, and
Yeah.
this is where once again, bro, the secular and the religious philosophical viewpoint will differ,
Hmm.
because from a
Hmm.
secular point of view, it's just about that. No, they don't belong here. They just moved here from whatever these recent countries are. How much of that is true? Let's say 50%, 40%, whatever. It doesn't matter. Even if it was 100% exactly that true, that's their way of looking at why they shouldn't be here, or why they are less than an Israeli. That's what it equates, right? But from
Hmm.
a religious point of view, Allah caused that to happen. Why did Allah
Mm.
cause that to happen? Why are they here? Why did they come at the same time we did? What can be? Why is Allah doing this? Why is Hashem doing this? What are we supposed to do with this information? Why did this cause and effect take place in the way that it did? Totally different view of how to look at the situation, right? And Israelis are
Yeah.
both religious and secular, and that creates a conflict in unity right there, just between Israelis. They can't agree on
So
what's actually happening, and that's a huge part of the problem. That's a
it's a
huge part
ma-
of the problem, and
it's a
and that's
massive
why,
part.
again,
It's massive.
it's not about, yeah, it's not about understanding of the way the world works.
We tried to address this on an episode. We had an
Sorry,
episode
you were
called
saying?
Eighth. Yeah, we tried to address this kind of religious viewpoint to a secular viewpoint. We did an episode called Atheism versus Secular. I mean,
Religion versus
religion versus secularism. Can they live together in the same society. And it's actually also an internal question that we're asking ourselves here in Israel. You know, we have national parks all over the country, and now religious people would like there to be separated swimming times, whereas all secular people don't want that. You see, and that's already a conflict, a national conflict along those lines of religion and secularism. So personally, I think that we can benefit here,
That's
which this was.
and that creates that.
Sorry?
Creates what?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, no, it
No, I'm
creates
saying go
what?
ahead.
I didn't quite catch you.
No, I was saying go ahead. I was listening. I agree with
Oh,
you.
right. So what I'm trying to get at is that these issues between religion and secular, at some point, they're going to come to an explosion as we see demographics change within the land. I want to know, as an American, do you think that we could benefit here in the Holy Land from a separation of church and state, still keeping Israel Jewish and democratic, but still managing to separate church and state somehow? Is that because being Jewish and democratic is something that is key to most Israelis? When you say separation of church and state, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a tough one. The good thing about America is that it was founded on principles. And interestingly enough, even though it's freedom of religion and separation of church and state, the principles of the the biblical principles were part of the Constitution. Um,
Hmm.
the idea that that you have to respect each other's property, that you have to respect each other's point of view, but to maintain certain civility and so that the country can function a certain way without any kind of breakdown in society. There's a lot of principles from the Bible, and that's how America was founded without forcing any specific tradition. And I think it's funny that I'm an American and I actually agree completely with that, and that's why I think America survived as long as it has and became
I
successful the way
agree.
it has because
I
of that
agree.
very important rule that we have, where religious people can feel that they can be religious and be respected and live the way that they want to live and not be infringed, and that even secular people say, okay, well, whether or not we believe a God made these ideas, we do believe that these ideas are the best ideas to live by, these principles. Um, like I said, cause and effect. We believe Hashem, Allah, is the one administrating this whole situation. But I think even from a secular point of view, cause and effect still is a reality. Something happened that caused the situation we have today. Find out what that is. Are we perpetuating more of it, or are we doing something now that's going to help alleviate it? One of the things I said in my post was you can't celebrate Arabs on Israeli society and at the same time criticize Palestinians. You can't say, because they're Palestinian, right? When
Hmm.
you ask them, they consider themselves Palestinian. Most of them, I would think. They consider themselves
Yeah,
Israeli
most
Palestinians,
that's
right?
about
They
right.
have Israeli citizenship. They live in Israel, um, and they live relatively good lives, but they still understand that they're Palestinian when they comes to their personal identity. Yes, they're Israeli, but they can't recite the national anthem and feel completely included, right? They
Yeah.
feel a little bit of a separation there. But if you celebrate this integration and use that as a model for why Israel is in the right, you can't do that and at the same time say how the Palestinians are, or at least infer that they're ticking time bombs and that they don't love us or they don't like. It doesn't make any sense to go with that narrative and then say that at the same time. You know what I mean? Like if you are happy about
For sure.
integrating yourself with a certain individual or people, you can't at the same time criticize them and call them ticking time bombs, or at least infer that, because that's just going to seem everyone on the outside looking in, and also make the Palestinian people themselves feel not trusting. So it's not helping.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think
That's
the
I'll tell
that's
you
building
that.
a
of trust is
So
so
key.
there has to be
Yes.
an inclusiveness. The Jewish people, once again, when I, when I and I think that the fact that I have Jewish friends who are, Persian Jews, Moroccan that feel alienated within Israel themselves, and they're Jewish. They're 100% Jewish. As far as the halakha is concerned, they were 100% born Jewish from a Jewish family. They have their lineage. There's no discussion as to whether or not they're Jewish or not, and yet they still feel some prejudice in Israel at certain times. Why is that? And if they experience that and they're 100% Jewish, what do you think those people are exhibiting against Palestinians? If they're exhibiting those behaviors towards other full-blown Jews, just because they're from a different background or a different tradition, this is what makes people think, well, how can the conflict ever be solved when the Jewish people themselves are not as united as they need to be in see themselves. I think that's also a factor, a big factor.
It's a huge
Uh,
factor. It's a huge factor, Gibran. And I think, understanding other people's ideologies is key to solving this issue. And, you you stated that you had some friends from Persian and Moroccan Jewish background. And I'm sure that they might have been in an area where the
Mm-hmm.
facial features, they don't really fit into the status quo of a certain town or city, and I can see how those problems arise. The thing
Mm-hmm.
that I want to focus on is how you tap into those communities, because not everyone in there thinks that's that way. Like I've lived a lot of my life in Israel, a lot of my time in the UK and in other countries as well, and I haven't experienced that blatant kind of disrespect that I have here in certain regions. So the question is how you get these small communities that are, let's say, religiously maybe a bit more fanatic to, or as well, we understand their ideology, but they understand our
Mm-hmm.
ideology. And what I mean by that is, in Jerusalem, you can have a gay pride event without somebody getting stabbed or without there being any violence. And we can also accept that maybe walking into or driving into certain areas in Jerusalem, we can respect that people keep the Sabbath there. And maybe driving my car down that specific street on that specific day might cause these people over there a bit of tension and a bit of harm. I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to look at ideologies that I disagree with and say, okay, I'm willing to accept this ideology as long as it's within the framework of the law.
Yeah.
The issue is when we have these ideological extremists and fanatics pushing the boundaries of law and causing havoc on both sides here, and that's what we have. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of things going on in the West Bank
So
and the town
yes.
Eviatar.
So my. Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Go
we
ahead.
have. I looked at that, and I noticed that there were peaceful parties that existed that could have been elected. For instance, in Gaza in 2005,
Hmm.
um, and they weren't. Now, when you look at politics and you look at why one narrative beats out another, why people are gravitating towards one way of doing things versus other, you have to look at the conditions that they're in. On a micro level, I can say, someone who is accepted and loved by their family, and have a good family home, and they have a great environment that they live in, where they feel accepted. If someone comes and sells them a narrative where they need to go be a gang member, or they need to go shoot people, or they need to go
Hmm.
fight against the police or the government, or whatever the case may be, that narrative is not
Hmm.
attractive, because on an emotional level, on a personal level, they don't feel that need. They don't feel that they need to do that. Now, if the family, hated that person, or they rejected them, or or they treated them without love, and they never got the affection and love and appreciation that they were supposed to get. When someone comes knocking and says, hey, why don't we go join a gang, they're going to be a lot more attracted to that idea. What I was saying was that Israel, being the moral, standing on the moral high ground and being so excited about their integration of Palestinians in their society and how Arabs and Jews work together in hospitals and all these different things, that's what destroys Hamas and these other groups more than anything. You won't have to even shoot one rocket. You won't need anything, because the more you integrate and show love, I know it sounds cliche, the less attractive Hamas sounds. Hamas is not attractive to Israeli Arabs. Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, if I guarantee you, if you did a survey and did one survey in Gaza, one survey in the West Bank, one survey in Israel proper, and said to all the Arabs living in all three locations, how excited are you about joining Hamas? Obviously, in Gaza, it's going to be the highest. But all of a sudden, the Palestinians living in Israel proper, who have Israeli citizenship, that are living relatively good lives, and they're not having to stop and be harassed as much, or I don't want to say harassed, but they don't need to be looked at as hard as Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza. They're not going to be attracted to the idea of signing up to join Hamas. Yes, there were riots, and a very small portion of the population did riot recently when all this stuff was happening with Sheikh Jarrah and everything that was going on. But that's a very, very small slither of the population of Israeli Arabs. There's 2 million Israeli Arabs living in Israel proper. If even 10% of them were rioting, it would look a million times worse. That was not what 10% or even 5% or even probably 1%. But it was enough to show on the media and make it look like it's a lot.
Yeah, like
so
it was a huge thing.
My proposition was, you already won, and you have military control, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but the objective should be, the Israeli people should be to try their best to try to find unity on the idea of, stop saying that you want to give a state to a people that you are not, you're not willing to live under their rule, or have your people live under their rule, or we're going to be this back and forth with the settlements and the swaps and all this stuff. It's just not practical anymore. And I think the best thing would be that you have the opportunity to just go for the inclusive route and say, listen, we just want to make it easier for citizenship. We want to make it easier to bring you people in. We want to, reduce all these situations and these living conditions that make Hamas and other groups attractive. If you reduce that, that's my viewpoint, that if you continue to do it that way, Hamas will become less and less attractive as time goes on, because the conditions that Hamas thrives off of will not exist. It'll become smaller and smaller and smaller, and it'll just be like the Palestinians that live in Israel proper. They'll just be like, yo, we're not interested in joining Hamas or doing anything. We're living good lives. We have our families. We can pray in the masjid. We're not blocked from praying and doing Ramadan and doing whatever we do. There'll still be problems with Temple Mount and things like that, but at least we'll be a lot more ahead than we are now, so we can get to those issues that are real issues a little bit later. But let's first deal with the ones that are much easier to tackle. Still hard, but much easier to tackle than these other issues. That's my point of view on it.
It's a very interesting take. Sorry, go ahead, Jared. Go ahead. I'll come back later to that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like your point of view is very similar to mine as to what needs to be done now. Like, I've had it in my head that, like, the best we can do right now to get the ball rolling is a concept called shrinking the conflict. Essentially, like, in easing up of, like, the occupation in the West Bank and making economic ties easier to be forged, allowing trade to be made much easier, allowing investment to come through, and begin the integration of systems, but on like a slow scale. Because, like, as we do that, in my view, there's a lot of brainwashing intentions that need to be dealt with on both sides. On both sides of the green line, there's a lot of brainwashing and a lot of tension that we need to help simmer down.
That'll make it a lot easier for people like myself. No. I'm sorry, it'll make it a lot easier for people like myself to say, hey, look at what the Israelis are doing. This narrative that you're trying to sell to Muslims is not really true. It's just not,
Hmm.
But as long as they can
Yeah.
still point out, all these different policies and all these different posts where people are anti-Palestinian, they won't even recognize their existence or their culture. I can't help you. I
Hmm.
can't. I won't be able to help the situation. It's going to be hard because they're going to point at those things and say, "Look, this is what they're doing." You're going to be siding with them. I need more. We need more people on the side of integration, more people on the side of acceptance, more people in the side of literally love, and
Yeah.
just inclusion and integration. It has to happen.
and
It
and
has to.
reconciliation. I've like
Yeah.
something that I've always said is
And
that like
reconciliation.
no matter how this conflict ends, there's gonna have to be like some. I hate the comparison, but I'm gonna say it. And nobody take me out of context for this. I'm looking at you, chat. There's gonna have to be a South African style reconciliation afterwards, because there's going to be a lot of feelings, and it might take a generation or two, but we're going to need that reconciliation process if we are to get like
100%,
get
Jared.
after this. Like, we're going
Yeah.
to need like West Bank Palestinians to be calling their kids from Nablus, and they're going to be living, I don't know, in Netanya, and we need Israelis to be able to live in like these Palestinian cities. We need everyone, so that way, like, there's not an Israeli city or Jewish city and an Arab city. There's just cities in this country of Arabs and Jews, which I think is the goal. It's also one of the things why I criticize settlements a lot, is because they don't help that narrative. They just keep pushing the idea that this town here or this city here, this is for Jews. That one over there, that's for Arabs. And like,
Hmm.
it's kind of this weird
Yeah.
system that we set ourselves up in after the 1948 war, where we've just kind of chosen to self-segregate, and like it wormed its way into the law, at least into the West Bank.
Well, the settlements were after 67. You got to remember that there were Jews living past the Green Line before 48, and there was transfers of populations or displacement or ethnic cleansing, however you want to look at it. Somebody got into an argument with me on a server about whether Israel did or did not ethnically cleanse during 48. And I said, obviously there was displacement there. And this is part of the reconciliation process, is going through these things that were wrong to any human, regardless if you're Israeli, a Tutsi, a Houthi, a Brazilian, or whatever. Anybody being displaced from their home and innocently is a terrible act. Any suicide bombing is a terrible act. Any innocent person caught in gunfire, which unfortunately, Gibran, we have a huge gunfire and illegal weapons problem here. A lady was shot in the head a couple of days ago, just a stray bullet from criminal, entities. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Was
We
that
as
the
Israelis
teacher?
and Palestinians, yeah. No, this is a new lady. Just now it happened
Oh,
in
a new
Bathiam.
lady.
It's
Oh,
terrible.
Jesus Christ. Ah.
It's a new one. Listen, there's been 5 Arabs killed this week in gunfire. This is how crazy. People don't realize, and the media doesn't focus on these things. We have an illegal weapons problem here that we need to tackle, and we need to be tough all over the board. It has to stop. Innocent people walking down the street. A teacher caught a bullet hanging up clothes. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're in 2021 now. We've got all the technology, we've got all the modernity, but we haven't caught up to it. We haven't figured out a way to say, okay, guys, you may think a little bit differently to me. You may think a little bit differently to me, but we have these things in common. We have these principles that bind us. We have these communities and these families and these people around us that we want to take care of and love. And also the land itself. I see Israelis and Palestinians, oh, we love the land itself, the trees, the pomegranates, the figs. So why is there environmental damage in Israel? Why were our coasts infected with tar a few months ago? Why when you go to a national park, there's litter and filth everywhere? Why, when you go into a stream after it's the tourist season, you literally have to pick up bucket loads of rubbish? If we love this land so much, and I'm speaking both to Israelis and Palestinians here, start taking care of it. Start looking after it. We've got an aquifer underneath the Judean mountains and Hebron mountains, which is larger than the Sea of Galilee, that is being infected with sewage water from settlements and from Palestinian cities in the West Bank. To me, that should be a uniting factor. Let's not get our groundwater poisoned. Let's see how we can share the resources. Let's see how we can move forward together, instead of, like you said, Gibran, earlier, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing again and again and again. And that's what we've been doing here.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
what we've been doing
nice
here.
environmentalist tangent.
And I would like to point out too, you know, everyone at some point someone's going to bring in religion and say that, well, Muslims are always supposed to hate Jews and it's religion. Everyone knows that the stories of Muslim women taking care of Jewish babies and vice versa, living in the Holy Land prior to the state of Israel, or even in other Muslim countries before the political conflict got, you know, exacerbated and out of hand. There were Muslim Jewish communities that were living together relatively peacefully most of the time. If you look at it statistically, it's most of the time. Yeah. And the fact that you have stories from Muslim women saying that, you know, grandmothers that say that, you know, they used to watch each other's children, I can promise you that they were all devout Muslims. I can promise you that. And I think everyone with a brain would think that anyone from back in those times, especially, were all devout Muslims that knew Islam. They knew their religion. They knew it backwards and forwards. That's all they had was religion. So the fact that there was even relative peace, definitely a lot more than there is now, that should tell you something, because you can't tell them that they were not following Islam. They were definitely following Islam. So if there was relative peace with Jews, then that should tell you that this idea of an eternal hatred against Jews or something like that, something is not right here, because then that would mean they were not following their religion and a fundamental part of their religion. So that right there should be evidence to let you know that it doesn't need to be this way. And the more we can get together and the more we can, you know, remove any situations that are going to translate to having to be the opposite way of conflict or war, and to bring up all these incidents that happened with specific Jewish groups in Medina that no longer exist. As a matter of fact, there's verses about Jews in Medina that practiced ideas that there aren't any Jews that even practice those ideas, like Ezra being the Sod and all this other crazy stuff. Those Jews don't even exist anymore. So, you know, the fact that these things get brought up is only because of present day conflicts and hatred and things like that. And I gotta go, but before I go, I want to say that one of the things that we both know, again, as Jews and Muslims, is that you know, hatred is what destroys communities. Baseless hatred. The rabbis, sages of the Second Temple, after the Second Temple was destroyed, it wasn't because they weren't practicing Judaism. It wasn't because they were not keeping the Sabbath or attending the synagogue. It was not even because of idolatry, which was what the reason was. Part of the reason was for the first temple's destruction. It was because of baseless hatred. It was because of something on the inside. It was because the principles, one of the fundamental principles, were not kept. And that's why those same sages would say these you know, these now legendary statements of, you know, the whole of the Torah is what you don't like done to yourself, don't do to your brother. The rest is commentary, things like that. I know I'm paraphrasing, but the fact that they can summarize the Torah into a behavior, that tells you that that's what it's all about, right? And the fact that we still fight over religion, and Muslims do it too. We argue over religion, and this person's not they're not doing it the right way or whatever. That just needs to get all out. It just needs to be just thrown out the window at this point, because if we don't get back to learning the lessons of the past, we're going to recreate the past, and the past is not what we want to do. We want to get out of the past and go into the future and make it a good one. So
inshallah, Habibi, inshallah. I really hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah.
I really, really hope so. And I think that's a great way to wrap things up. We're talking about
Yeah.
acceptance here, guys. We're talking about reconciliation. And that's with all things. We're not just talking about Israel, Palestine. We're talking about all ideologies, religious, not religious, black, white, green, yellow. Understand that we're all on this planet together. We have a responsibility to take care of it and to take care of one another. And that's regardless if that other is different to you in any what way. I would say embrace, learn as much as you can, and slowly, step by step, I really do think that we're going to move forward to a better future. And I think that it can start here with the Israelis and Palestinians. And I think that could lead to shockwaves more over the Middle East and hopefully other conflicts that are raging over the world, in Africa, in Ethiopia, all over the place. There's terrible conflicts. So let's try and solve this thing here. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. Gibran, I really want to get hold of your book, so I'm gonna have a look for it tonight, and hopefully, I know Amazon have some delivery issues over
Thank
here,
you.
but hopefully they'll be able to get it to us quick.
I mean, if anybody wants to find
and I just
Gibran's
want to
book,
say one last thing.
link below.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't
just
mean
wanna
to
say
cut you off. I was just
one last
plugging
thing.
the book.
One of the things I mentioned in that post that I made about. No, it's cool. One last thing is I wanted to say that I mentioned in that post that I made a few months ago that it's the Holy Land before it's anything. In the Quran, it's mentioned as Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land. It's not mentioned by any national name or anything like that. It's mentioned for the land itself. The land itself is considered the Holy Land. And it is Israel. It is Palestine. It is Canaan. It's whatever you want to call it. It is all those things. But it's the Holy Land before it's anything, right?
Agreed
So
fully.
how you identify and what you want to call that hill or that region or that valley or that pomegranate tree bush or whatever, anything that you want to call the land that is the Holy Land, is Holy Land before it's anything. So we need to make sure that we don't get caught up in forcing our version of what our experience is in the Holy Land. And we need to focus more about the idea that it is the Holy Land and that whatever name it was ever called by or is called by are all valid experiences that people self-identify with and experience for themselves. And I think that that's very crucial. And I'm happy that we can speak this way on this podcast, and invite me back anytime whenever you guys want to have me back.
Oh, it would be a pleasure. It would be a real pleasure, Gibran, and I'm sure we'll get you back at some point. It will be a real honor to have you back, and maybe even bring a few other guests on and do something dynamic. It's been a real pleasure. I wish we had some more time. I want to thank our viewers. I want to thank our viewers for staying with us and supporting our channel. And it's really important, if you know people that are interested in what's going on over here, please do share us out there. Get us out there to your friends, to your family, to anyone that's interested in what's going on, so we can help building this project and really start getting the word out there, and we can start seeing a better future. So thanks so much, Gibran. Jared, did you want to say a couple of words?
New name for the country: West Iraq. Yeah, we're West Iraq. West Iraq or Uptown Egypt. One of the two.
That's pretty well. Pretty well.
Uptown Egypt. I like that.
Yeah, Uptown Egypt.
Yeah. Wow, they both sound really cool.
Yeah.
Uptown cool. Uptown Egypt cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, there's nothing else I want to leave.
See you guys later. Peace.
It's great having you.
Thank you so much. Ma salame, Gibran. Ma salame.
Yeah. All right. Bye. I like South Syria.
South Syria as well.
South Syria, South Syria is one that was already used. I keep getting Discord messages. Fuck off, Discord. First time I casted an episode for a while. I know.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, well, you've done well to cut that out, Jared. You've been doing well.
Yeah.
You just had to get one out there.
I just had to get one. I've been doing a lot better in the most recent episodes. South Lebanon. You know what? South Lebanon, I prefer that one over South Syria. South Lebanon's funnier.
South Lebanon.
Yeah.
There we go.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah. All right. So, do you have access to the end broadcast button? Because I need both my hands for a very important
Sure.
action.
Sure. I don't, Jared. I don't have
You
access
don't?
over anything. No, you're gonna have
Oh,
to do all the
no.
work yourself. You're gonna have to do it yourself, my friend.
Oh no! All right. Well, this is going to be a bit difficult.
Little Iran. That's the best one so far.
Little Iran. Yeah. Little Iran.
I love it. I love it.
Oh my god. Oh, we could go for hours with that, but unfortunately, it's time to leave, and I'm going to figure this out.